Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankarasharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti Om. Namaste. Welcome to Satsang, Vedanta Satsang. We have Mr. Claudio, our official inquirer, questioner. Do you have questions today or commentaries?
No, not really.
Okay. So, Lynn, please.
I'm wondering if you could help me with getting a better settling it more to figure out how the self is. I'm never quite get self-effulgent, self-evident, without thought, without even an I am thought. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can, and it's impossible. The self is not part, is not a product or property of the body, of the mind, the body-mind complex, let's say, okay? It expands beyond the body-mind complex. When the body-mind complex dies, the self remains. Yeah? And in the absence of the body-mind, the self cannot be detected. The same way electricity cannot be detected without the presence of a bulb light, okay? So electricity is there running through the wires, but we can't detect electricity there. So the moment that we turn the power, the switch, and then we see, oh yes, there is electricity there. So the same thing with consciousness. It's not property of the body-mind. You know, it's the body-mind goes, consciousness remains, but in the absence of the body-mind, it cannot be detected or experienced. You understand? So the question is, how can I experience myself without the body-mind? No, it's not possible. I can only experience myself through the body-mind. You understand? We need the body and the thought, I am, I exist. And then it's only a question of defining this I am, I exist. We either define it as the bulb, we define it as the electrical power, right? So it's all a question of defining ourselves, you know, coming to understanding of my true fundamental nature, which is, by the way, free and independent from the body-mind. That's, I mean, if it wasn't free and independent from the body-mind, and then there was nothing to self-recognition. The whole purpose of self-recognition is to establish the individual jiva in consciousness as consciousness, but it is relevant only to the degree that one understands that as consciousness, I am free and independent of the body-mind. With the body-mind, I become the reflected consciousness, the knowing, experiencing entity. Without the body-mind, I'm no longer an experiencing entity in that body-mind complex, but I'm still an experiencing entity in all corners of the universe, wherever there are intelligent living organisms with a thought, I am, I exist. So once we lose the body-mind, once we are properly established in consciousness as consciousness, we don't have any concern about losing this piece of equipment, basically for two reasons. One is that we no longer crave for experience in duality. And the second reason is that, what's the big deal? I lose this piece of instrument here, but I have 8 billion other pieces of instruments alone on this small planet. You understand? So it's not a big deal. You understand? So, but your question is, so how can I understand consciousness without the mind? So, and then that is again is a yogic question. So now the self can only be experienced without the I am. You understand? No. Without the I am, there is no recognition of I am Brahman. I am Brahman requires I am. So I am Brahman. Without I am, there is no recognition of one's nature as limitless Brahman. Okay? So my nature does not depend on this recognition because my nature is already ever free. But I, as the jiva, the experience entity, you know, I want this self-recognition because I want to relax. And I can only relax when I acknowledge and claim my true nature as consciousness, free and independent consciousness, right? So now try to reformulate your question again to see if it's still there.
So I think I get confused when because we're using dualistic language all the time. And when it says self-aware or self-evident,
Self-effulgence.
it kind of puts me back into the realm of experience.
Yeah.
And so I just have to mentally drop the language.
Yes. Yeah, you got it. So it is self-existence, existing because it is the existence of everything. Its existence does not depending on another existing factor that lends existence to existence, consciousness, Brahman. No, it's self-existent, it's self-effulgent, no? Self-luminous, self-conscious, okay? How could it not be self-conscious? The difficulty there is how could it not be self-conscious if it is the consciousness that concedes us consciousness, human consciousness. It can only be it's the very source of knowingness, of knowledge, of consciousness. It's the very fabric of knowledge, the very source of knowledge. How can it not be self-luminous and self-knowing, self-recognized? It is, you know, it's self-existing, self-conscious, but it's not an experience knowing entity. You understand? How can it be an experience knowing entity if there's nothing but consciousness? It's one without a second. In order to be an experiencing entity, we need duality. We need Maya to come into play to bring about configurations of the three gunas in which the jiva, the subject, the subject jiva can experience the objects around in its environment. So in the absence of Maya, in the absence of duality, consciousness is not an experienced entity. You understand? Because there's nothing to experience. When we say that self-luminous, self-existent, self-conscious, it's not an experiencing, knowing entity. It's the very source of knowingness, knowledge, consciousness, existence. You understand? It's our fundamental nature, the fundamental nature of everything. The difficulty is this tendency, as you already got it, it's this tendency of trying to understand things dualistically and by the means of sensory perception, sensory knowledge, experience. You all know what I want to, how can I experience? When I say that I am self-aware, So what it means I, my true nature, I am self-aware. But in the absence of my jiva, I cannot even experience my true nature. You understand? I am the true nature, Purna, limitless existence, consciousness, but I cannot experience. Therefore, we have all these speculations that maybe Maya came into play and it was somehow consciousness itself has say, okay, Maya, I'm gonna give you a permission to project something here so that I can experience myself and recognize that I'm only experiencing myself. But how does it do so? By the means of its jivas. We need the experience knowing entity so that consciousness can become conscious of its true nature, its soul, its spirit. It's very simple, but it's the difficulty is because we tend to see with the eyes of the experiencer who wants to experience things dualistically. Therefore, I'm still having a problem to accept myself. You understand? Only by the means of knowledge. Yeah? But self-knowledge is only possible by the means of jnana, knowledge. Even we have to remember, Ramana Maharaj has made that statement towards the end of its life. He said, by knowledge and knowledge alone, the self can be realized. You understand? So it's only by knowledge, it's not by experiencing the self, as we know. So it is self-knowing, it is self-aware, it's self-luminous, and it becomes an experiencing entity only when it shines in the intellect of the human or the intelligent creatures. You understand? And then it becomes a knowing, experiencing entity.
Yeah, many, many years of emphasis on experience and meditation has sort of cluttered, my understanding, and I have to keep trying to push it away. And
then we push that notion away, Lynn, until we come to the very, very end of this search, of this inquiry. And toward the very end, we have to realize that we are experiencing consciousness and existence 24/7. And how you experience it? Of course I am experiencing it, because we don't, and it's not only a question of inferential knowledge. It's not only inferential knowledge. Inferential knowledge is, if I see, I infer that I have eyes. Yeah? So this is inferential knowledge. With consciousness, we say assim, I am conscious, therefore, I have somewhat a source of consciousness at my disposal. So this is inferential understanding, knowledge, okay? But there is a experiential element to self-knowledge, which is you experience consciousness shining in your intellect 24/7. And this consciousness shining in our intellect is not the mind, it's not the intellect. It shines in the intellect as pure consciousness. And then it assumes the role of the I thought. And then we've seen its conditioning, its programs, its knowledge and ignorance. It becomes an experiencing entity, but we need to distinguish this pure existence, consciousness, which we experience 24/7. Once we understand, and then we can go and say yes. And furthermore, my knowledge is also based on an experience that I do experience awareness 24/7. And then say, oh, yes, you experience it. So how is that? So tell me, So how does it feel? And then Ramji comes and say, it does not feel like anything. Or we could say, it feels like the world because I am experiencing the world, right? So I'm just experiencing consciousness 24/7 because there is an experiential element to it. You can notice it. You can say, no, that is the mind. But if you look through, if you discriminate and discern between consciousness and the mind, the primary instrument that makes us knowers and experiencers, okay, you can sense it. There is consciousness shine, and then there are thoughts happening following this consciousness. The I thought follows this consciousness. Therefore, we are always experiencing consciousness. It's more easily perceivable when the mind is very sattvic and quiet. But then after some time, you just drop that notion, that dependence on the sattvic mind to experience awareness, because you know that you experience awareness, and depending on the quality of the thoughts around the I thought, it's going to feel different. You understand? But I am experiencing consciousness, and now I am pissed off. So I'm experiencing consciousness, and it is conditioned by irritation. You understand? It's conditioned by love, it's conditioned by fear, by happiness, whatever. But I'm experiencing consciousness, and it's there for us to realize and to acknowledge that we experience this consciousness. It's easier to understand it when the mind is more sattvic, more silent, and then we have a better feel. Why? Because the thoughts are not there. It's that thing between thoughts or in the states of no mind and all those notions that we have been seeing lately. I'm by now, I don't know which one of those two texts we have been covering, but we have been covering extensively this same subject that, we experience the I thought and we experience the world, but fundamentally we experience consciousness, and we can realize that consciousness is being experienced even in the absence of the I thought. And that can happen during the day. If I meditate, it can happen in deep sleep, in samadhi, natural sahaja samadhi. It happens when the mind is just totally peaceful in the awakened states. And then what we experience, if you don't experience I exist, and if you don't experience the object that comes up within my field of perception, and then what am I experiencing? I'm experiencing what? Some people will say, oh, you experience silence, you experience empty. No, I'm experiencing consciousness. You see the difference? It's so simple. Huh? We experience consciousness, and consciousness is being experienced 24/7 through all of our experience. But depend on the nature, the quality of the I thought, it may be a little more difficult to acknowledge that I am experiencing consciousness all the time. Isn't it true, Elizabeth?
Yes, it is true. We're not always aware of it, though. That's perhaps what Lynn is saying. We're not always aware of that we are always conscious.
Yes, we may not all the time aware, because when the thoughts come in the world of objects and thoughts come around the I thought, and then we become aware of the thoughts, the objects of the world. But once you know that in any case, you experience the world, but before you experience the world, you experience consciousness. And then there is no question of trying to chase consciousness as an object of experience, because consciousness can only be experienced as the subject, as the nature of the subject, jiva.
Yeah.
Is it clear, Karen?
Yes, it is clear. It's one of the subtleties that
This is
we have
very
to work on to grasp, but
very subtle stuff.
yes, but I get it. Mhm.
Good. And Cloud seems to be, saying like, yes, you are right, Lindo.
Yes. Yes, this is why on Monday, when maybe I try to reformulate what I say on Monday, because we talk about the fact, that when you see nothingness, you actually are seeing two things. Not only there is also witness, there is consciousness, of course. And I was saying that that for me it's easy when there is nothingness, or when you are in meditation, or when you have a very sattvic mind, to realize consciousness. Now with this knowledge, with Vedanta, of course, before Vedanta, I was not aware about that. I only see the objects, and I only see my sattvic mind. It was really beautiful. Silence. Wow, I was very, good. And then when I wake up, I was good for an hour, more or less, maybe less, half an hour. It depends. But now we talk about what I was saying, what I try to say, because my English is always a little bit poor, but it is better, I think, in these 2 years. And I was saying that when the I thought had bad thoughts and get identified, then it's hard to see that there are consciousness. When the I thought is identified, when you have depends on the quality of the thought that you have, then it's harder and harder, and then this is where we have to work. So it means that we have to, or at least is what I'm doing now, it's to try to objectify the I thought that get mixed with thought. So, and recognize that I am this consciousness, I am the existence itself of the object, the consciousness that is really, it's always there, and you cannot, it's inevitable. You are always experiencing something in some way, also in this sleep. So it's always there. But when you get identified with something, and then the I thoughts comes up and you say, I am suffering.
And this is the build of knowledge, because this knowledge, it serves us to discriminate, as you beautifully put, the subject from the object. And then the object may be a moment of bad thoughts and bad emotions. And then it helps us to separate, or to discriminate the subject, and say, no, I'm free from this bad feeling, this bad thought, this bad emotion. So we can have this instrument, this tool, to keep working on the spot as we get identified or get attached to a feeling, emotion. You understand? And then when we see we are overreacting to the world as if the world could really impact us, it happens even after self-recognition. It happens with me. It happens almost only within the relationship with my wife, because somehow it's couples often they serve to press one another buttons. You understand? So even when those things happen, and you overreact as if you could be affected, so the recovering time is very quick, because, as we say, knowledge, self-knowledge, or knowledge, is that which is always available and good. You understand? So our human nature, can bring about a reaction that it appears as I am really being affected, and I'm really angry, and I'm irritable, or whatever, and things like that. But the yoni, it recovers quickly, because of what? Because self-knowledge is that which is always good. It's not subject to doubt. There is no feeling, there is no bad thought, bad emotion that is going to bring about doubt in respect to one's true nature, once it's really understood and it's clear, it's hard and fast and available, there is no bad emotion, bad reaction, or bad experience that can bring about or cancel or bring about doubt in regards to that knowledge. You understand? That is the difference between knowledge and experience. It's like once we know that 2 + 2 = 4, we don't need to make those maths again and again. So it's a knowledge that's always available, right? So once you know who you are, there's nothing in the world that could cancel that knowledge, in the sense that it comes to surface, even because the mind cannot think several thoughts at the same time. In fact, the mind can only think one thought at a time. And the mind thinks, I am, and then when it sees I am, immediately it sees the cat, and then it thinks the cat, okay? The mind cannot think I am and the cat at the same time. You understand? So the mind becomes what it perceives. Yeah? So the mind thinks I am, and then it sees the cat, and then the mind sees and say, oh, the cat. And then it let go of the thought I am to attach to the thought the cat. And how about I am Brahman? So the mind cannot be in 3 places at the same time. I am Brahman, I am the jiva, the reflect consciousness, and I am the cat, or the cat showed up. The mind cannot. The mind just holds one thought at a time. You understand? So when we say that we experience consciousness all the time, it's correct. The correct understanding is like we experience it cognitively in spite of our experience of our mental condition and the objects that are producing our mental condition. We experience consciousness cognitively, okay? But we cannot hold the thought, okay? The thought of the world, the I thought, and consciousness at the same time, because the mind cannot do that. But once we have detached from the world, detached from this fascination with the I thought, like Nisargadatta Maharaj was saying, detach from the world and hold on to the I am, I exist thought feeling. Once we let go of the world thought and the I am thought, and then we invite to hold the thought on the source of the I am, meaning to say, bring the thought, bring our mind to the scriptures, okay? And then Aham Brahmasmi, profoundly being contemplated, let's say, okay? So once we did that, detach from the world, detach from the ego, and attach to the scriptures, and we hold that inquiry, and then there is great potential for us to recognize the truth behind those powerful words, Aham Brahmasmi. Once it's recognized, and then you know, and then cognitively, you know that you experience the ego, you experience the world, but you experience consciousness all the time. You understand cognitively. But if we want to experience consciousness as the only thought in my mind, in truth, there is only one thought in the mind at the time. But if we want to experience consciousness, and then I have to detach from the world like you always did, detach from the ego, okay, and attach to the self. As we know, consciousness is not an object of attachment. We cannot reach it, we cannot objectify, we cannot experience, we cannot even know it objectively. So how are we going to attach to consciousness? Detaching from the world, detaching from the ego, and attaching to consciousness. By the means of meditation, we attach to the reflection of consciousness in my meditative mind, on my sattvic mind. The sattvic mind is going to produce a beautiful, loving reflection of consciousness that feels limitless, feels peaceful. You understand? Shanti. So you're going to experience consciousness, then detaching from the world, detaching from the thoughts around the I am. Okay, Sagadatta Maharaj always say, detach from the world, hold on to I am, and then you're going to be transferred to the absolute. What he was trying to say is, let go of the world, let go of the ego, and then sooner or later you're going to be transferred. I used to play transfer to the absolute. So transfer to the absolute is nothing but going into that state that is commonly related or referred as Nirvikalpa Samadhi. You understand? But from the standpoint of Vedanta, we do not need Nirvikalpa Samadhi. You understand? We need Sahaja Samadhi. In truth, we need knowledge. We need to understand our true nature. And then that is going to create a certain mental environment in which we experience in those moments of peace and silence during the day, depending on our lifestyle, we can experience this nice reflection of consciousness on a properly resolved mind. Remembering how I am that original consciousness and I experience its reflection. We can never experience consciousness directly, but we experience its reflection, and it has a nice feel. It feels limitless and peaceful. Huh? So can we experience the self? Yes, cognitively, we experience the self because we understood that there is no experience without the presence of light. And light is an analogy for consciousness. I know I'm experiencing consciousness. Maya cannot fool me any longer. Okay, I experience consciousness. But if I want to experience the nice and very faithful reflection of consciousness, and then I have to look for certain mental states in which I can experience that beautiful reflection of consciousness in a I am thought, which is as pure as it can be. You understand? So we do experience this all the time cognitively. There is a feel to it, although the feel is going to be conditioned by the state of the mind. But we know that, oh yes, I'm experiencing this and that, but I'm experiencing consciousness in the background. You understand? And we experience it as well by producing a certain mental state on which there is a clear reflection of consciousness, and we can sense in that reflection our peace and our limitless nature. Yeah. Okay, so these conversations are very nice because it makes these teachings more and more clear on a very subtle level. And I have the impression that most of you have understood already, you know, although sometimes there is still a little bit of resistance, because once we clearly understand it, all we need to do is to embrace it, to claim it and say, yes, I got it. And now there's nothing to be concerned. Right, Karen? Anything else? Then let's go to our big picture. We saw last time, we are towards the end of the book, page 52. The self. Okay, did you find it, Elizabeth?
Yes, I did. Sorry.
Good. So, and then on that paragraph of the self, chapter 11, we have seen the first subtitle there, and then now we begin from the light that illumines. the light that illumines. So consciousness here is being presented by it's this classic analogy of the light, our solar light, our sunlight, is an analogy to the light of consciousness. And why does the sunlight is often referred in analogy to as a symbol of the self? It's because without the sunlight, the objects in the world, these objects we experience during our daytime, awakened state, these objects cannot be, they are not revealed and illumined. So they need the light in order to be revealed. They need the light. Light is going to illuminate and then reveal the name, the color, the form, okay? And then we can superimpose attributes to these objects, okay? Our likes and dislikes, we can project as well. So the light does that. And what is the light of the light? Again, yeah? So we say that there is a light, it's a big, huge pramana, means of knowledge. Yeah? It feels to be almost more fundamental than the sense organs, because the sense organs cannot really experience the world without fire, without light. Yeah? It's a very important, fundamental means of knowledge, pramana. But there is a pramana behind the physical light that we have around here, which is another means of knowledge. No, which is consciousness. Out of consciousness, the world of the 5 elements, which includes fire, came into existence, and then fire is going to serve the purpose to illumine our environment so that the jivas can experience and know and grow one's life experiences. Now, so we have this analogy, likewise with the space, which are the most important analogies to point to the nature of the self. It's the light that illumines. It's not physical light, it's consciousness. It's the consciousness present as a light because it shines in the human intellect, and then it illumines jiva's environment, so that jiva can experience the world. It's the reflected consciousness, okay? So, which depends on the original consciousness, which is the nature of consciousness. The self, which is ever present, because without it, nothing could be perceived or experienced, as we know. Without light, we cannot perceive and experience anything. Without the light of light, which is consciousness. Without the eye behind the eyes, the ears behind the ears. So without the light behind the light, nothing can be perceived, known, and experienced. If I hold an object in my hand, and then we go to the classic analogy or example. So we have an object, whatsoever object. And then when we hold an object, it's a kind of a cheap Swiss knife. So if we hold an object, so we see the object, and we unconsciously, we don't see the light that's revealing it. We somehow, we don't take into the picture. We say, no, I see the object here. But, no, the light, of course, I'm seeing the light. Oh, I'm seeing, but I'm not seeing, because my attention goes to the hand and the object, right? So no, we experience the light every time we experience an object, because the light is there permeating and reflecting the object. In the absence of the light, the object cannot be perceived and known. And how about in the absence of the object? In the absence of the object, what's happening? We have light, and we have space, emptiness, nothingness. So in the absence of an object, more often than not, we say we don't experience the light, because it becomes really perceivable when it reflects on a name, color, and form. It has to hit an object, and then we experience the light. So we remove the object, and then there is space, emptiness. And then how am I going to recognize the light if it does not really shine on space? You understand? So, but we need to understand that I am experiencing the light, although it's more easily perceived when it shines on an object. So we don't need that. We are Vedantic guys. We know that the same light in its nature is shining on our intellect, and we are perceiving this light of consciousness as our intellect, intelligent, cognitive, knowing ability to perceive the world. So we know that it shines in the absence of even the eye thought. Okay. When there is something else present, which is very much evident, but which everyone takes for granted. So the light is always present. We discount it. It is the light in which the book is visible. The book is pervaded by the light. Without it, there will be no experience of this little knife. Sticking with this metaphor, it is important to note the following point. The light is not PPP, like I said the other day. The light is not part, property, or product of the book or this one. So the light is not being originated by the object on which it reflects. It's not a part, it's not a property, it's not a byproduct, it does not depend, it's not, okay? It's not being originated, the light from the object. So it says that this light then is an independent factor. This light of consciousness is an independent factor. Likewise, the light that pervades the object and reveals the object, it's independent factor. It means to say it's independent from the object it is revealing, okay? It is an independent factor. It pervades the objects, okay, to make them visible. The light is not limited by the boundaries of the object. It's not, okay? It goes, it moves, it shines in all directions infinitely, you know? It's limitless light, okay? It's not limited by the boundaries of the object. It could take the book, we can destroy the book, we can destroy any object, and we cannot touch the light. The same goes for space. We can do whatever we want to do with the objects within space. The space remains intact. The light that reveals the object remains intact. It does not depend, it's not limited by the boundary, okay? The light will not be affected when we destroy the object. The light existed before the object. Here, there is light, and then I bring the object. The light exists before and exists during and exists afterwards. It's going to reflect whatsoever comes into the scope of its light. The light exists before and it will continue to exist after the object. Finally, and the most important, that goes to Lynn's question. Finally, and most importantly, when the object is removed, the light continues to be there. The object is removed. Okay, let's remove. The light continues to be there. But it's not visible when there is no reflecting medium. We are talking about one reflecting medium. There is a medium here on which light permeates, illumines, and reflects the object. We remove the object, and then light is no longer permeating, illumining, and revealing anything. In the absence of a reflecting medium, this light is most of the time discounted, ignored, okay? not taken into account. Okay, in the absence, like Lin was saying, in the absence of the medium called the Jiva Atma, consciousness is still shining, but in the absence of the Jiva Atma, this consciousness literally cannot be perceived. You understand? And then in analogy, we see Mithya. So in the absence of the objects reflecting the light, the sunlight being illumined and revealed by light, in the absence of the object, in most cases, we just discount the light itself. You will say, no, that is, I don't see the light because I'm not seeing the object. It says that the light exists before, it expands, it's not limited by the boundaries. And but when you remove the objects, most often than not, the light is not visible or perceived because there are no reflecting objects on which the light ping, bounces and revealed. Do you understand, Claudio? The scriptures point out that consciousness is comparable to light in many ways. And this is a very, very important classic analogy. Hence, what we have said above also applies to consciousness. Of course, I was anticipating what Swami Paramarthananda was going to say next. Consciousness is not part, it's not property or product of the body. It is an independent factor that pervades the body and makes it sentient. It makes it conscious. The body appears to be conscious due to consciousness. In fact, we know the body is not really conscious. We could say, no, the subtle body is conscious. And then on further analysis, we will say, no, the subtle body is not really, independently conscious. It is a nice reflector, but it owns its consciousness to consciousness itself, our true nature. So the same thing applies. Its consciousness is not part, property, and product. It is what pervades. It's independent factor that pervades the body-mind, and then the body-mind becomes conscious. So in fact, the way it happens is that consciousness is going to pervade the subtle body, and then the subtle body, being the proper medium, is going to pervade the physical body and then make the physical body appear as sentient and animate by consciousness. Consciousness pervades the subtle body, makes the subtle body filled with conscious existence. The subtle body is going to vivify and enliven the physical body, and then the physical body appears as if it is conscious. Oh, but the guy died and then there is no consciousness. There is still consciousness in the body. What left the physical body was the subtle body. Consciousness is still there. And what is consciousness is doing there? I thought consciousness had all power to enliven the physical body. No, consciousness is still there and it's doing its purpose. Now it is decomposing the physical body to bring it back to the basic elements. Consciousness is always there, okay? But it is the subtle body who was designed to do the job of activating and animating the physical body, making it sentient. Consciousness is not a fact or limited by the boundaries of the body. Consciousness will therefore survive the death of the body as it exists prior to the body, during the body, and after the appearance of the body. This is very important because we get the impression that before the body, I was not here. I came here with the body. That gives us the impression that the consciousness is a byproduct of the body. So Vedanta comes and says, no, consciousness was there before the body and remains after the appearance of the body. Okay, it reminds me again of Nisargadatta Maharaj and his talks and the compilations that that produce a few books. There was a book that was entitled Prior to Consciousness, or Prior to Mind, prior from experiencing this reflect consciousness. In that book, he used to hammer saying, what was your condition before you were born? You remember that, Link? What was your condition before you were born? Okay, I want you to tell me. I mean, he used to drive us crazy because, I mean, that kind of talk does not make any sense. Before the appearance of the body and the reflect consciousness. So I was free from any condition, but he used to refer to the absolute, meaning to say he wants to encourage people to experience Nirvikalpa Samadhi as if Nirvikalpa Samadhi is enlightenment. He has created so much confusion. I mean, he was my most dear guru for over almost 20 years, but he made a lot of confusion because giving, in one hand, he would say, understanding is all, knowledge is all. On the other hand, he would say, you must experience the absolute, So it was very confusing. Okay. Consciousness will therefore survive the death of the body as it exists prior to the appearance of the body and after the appearance of the body. This surviving consciousness will not be perceived, however, because the reflecting medium of the body-mind is not there, just like in the opening of our satsang today. Consciousness is not going to be perceivable, meaning to say, consciousness is only perceived by the living jivas, the living organisms, the living creatures. When you see something alive, you see consciousness. Yeah. So in the absence of life, let's say, you don't see consciousness. But we are Vedantic guys. We know that consciousness is there even in the earth, in the rocks, in the sand. How you know that consciousness is there? Because we see the existence of a rock, of a sand, of earth. So we know that we can perceive consciousness even in the inert objects of the universe. But this consciousness is, in the common sense, for the people without this knowledge, it can only be perceivable if we have a reflecting medium, meaning to say a subtle body attached to the physical body, because the subtle body is too invisible, it's too subtle. Nobody can perceive one another subtle body. We can't really see the subtle body. We can see the certain mental expressions, but they come through the physical body, our words, our emotions, our actions. So we need subtle body attached to the physical body, and then we perceive consciousness. It's there, permeating, surviving, but in the absence of the body-mind complex, it cannot be perceived, okay? So with the exception of the yanis, the ones understanding, having this knowledge that can perceive while alive consciousness even on inert objects. But the point here is that I cannot perceive consciousness without, in connection to Lynn's question, I cannot perceive my body-mind, my consciousness here without the aid of my body-mind complex. You understand? In the absence of this medium, the body-mind, I cannot know and experience that limitless consciousness, okay? It's there, it's not a byproduct, it's independent entity, okay? It expands in all directions. and survives the death of the body. But in the absence of the body-mind complex, the Jiva Atma no longer can gain knowledge. Okay, knowledge is only possible when we have the reflecting medium, the body-mind complex. It needs to be there. Any more insights, Lynn?
Absolutely no insights, but I was thinking of pralaya. And so in as itself, yeah, awareness, when you, that language or being this jiva, it's always awareness of, or, it's, I figure if I get this, it's the party's over. I get to, absolutely exist as myself, but this is the last thing I can't, to place the self in its rightful place.
And what about
outside of space and time?
Yeah.
It's that. Don't worry, I'll get there.
Okay,
I'll get
it. When the universe is no longer, duality is no longer present, everything shrinks back into the seed potential macrocosm causal body. When there is nothing, there is no Maya, no Ishvara, no Jiva, no Jagat. So what is the condition? What is your condition as consciousness? You are still self-luminous, self-evident, okay? But now you don't have any medium. You don't have Ishvara, you don't have Jagata, on which consciousness, shows up as Jagat, and you don't have the Jiva, who are the agents designed to experience and gain this knowledge, you understand? So in the absence of pralaya, so I, consciousness, remain in my fullness, and absolutely imperceivable. I cannot be perceived, okay? I cannot be perceived by anyone because there is nobody. Jivas are not there. I cannot be seen, I cannot be known. I'm beyond knowledge and ignorance. I am my fullness. That's why they put it as the night of Brahman, because when we go into deep sleep, the universe disappears. The body, mind, and everything disappears. When consciousness Brahman goes into deep sleep, and then what is his condition, is just not knowing. There is no duality. There is nothing. There is only full, limitless existence consciousness without any superimposition produced by Maya. So we remain full, whole, and complete through pralaya. You understand? We remain full, whole, and complete through the three states. We remain full, whole, and complete during deep sleep state and Nirvikalpa Samadhi. You understand? It's the same logic. We are always there. Everything is happening within consciousness. So the same thing is when Brahman goes to sleep, and then the world disappears, the eternal Jiva disappears, the eternal Ishvara disappears, the eternal Jagata disappears, and there is only Brahman having a good sleep. It sleeps for billions or trillions of years, but it feels just like a few hours to Brahman, as the scriptures say. Okie dokie. No need to be afraid. This is a question that is rooted still with this misidentification or confusion about my nature. We want to acknowledge and claim our nature as limitless consciousness, but at the same time, we want to drag our our apparent nature as an experience entity. I say, I want to be that, but I want to remain as the experiencing entity. We want, we want to eat the cake and keep the cake at the same time. Yeah. So it's due to some residual identification with the body mind, which is the experiencing entity. So the experience entity needs to know that nothing, there's no reason to be concerned, because my nature remains the same during the three states and during the appearance and disappearance of the universe. My nature remains the same, and nothing comes to an end because Maya is going to be there, doing its job, producing again the Shwara, Jiva, and the Jagat. Oh, but I cannot be an experience. And then what is the big deal about self-knowledge and moksha if I'm not going to be there enjoying myself,
Yeah, what's in it for me?
What is it? It comes from that seed of self-ignorance that I'm still attached to experience, and I need my experiencing agent. I want to take it with me to Brahman and start creating duality in Satya, in Brahman, superimposing Mitya in Satya. No, it's not possible. But we don't need to be concerned, as we have already established by logic, because I remain in my true nature. I mean, this self-knowledge, it takes not only understanding, but a deeper understanding that somehow cancels our vasanas for experiencing the world, experiencing duality, so that we can really have a nice dense vairagya there working for us. It's a positive indifference in regards to the dualistic world of experience. Okie dokie. Nice talking to you. Very nice satsang today. If we do a few more satsangs like that, we're going to need to print those enlightenment certificates, and then I send to all of you, because what else can we talk about after looking into these teachings? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, my friends. Arrivederci. We meet again soon. Ishvara willing.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Ciao.
Bye. Ciao. Ciao. Ciao.